Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. It's been quite a busy time for me recently with lots of commentary and other stuff going on. And I've just been catching up with some of the games played in the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in Berlin. And I wanted to show you one of the games played in the earlier rounds in the group stage, which is just a sparkling attacking game. So this is Alexandr Predke from Russia against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from France. And, well, neither player qualified from the group. But this game is definitely worth looking at. So, and there's a very nice echo of a motif from a famous attacking game. So here we go. We've gone into an English, and those of you with good memories might remember that this exact variation was played in a game in the Candidates Tournament in 2020 between Anish Giri and Ian Nishi in, I think it was one of the early rounds, could have even been round one. Nepo won a brilliant game. I think it was one of the best games of the Candidates Tournament, actually. If not one of the best games of 2020. So this is a really sharp opening variation. I mean, unless one had prepared this and very well, one would never play these kind of moves. You know, a weird knight move to the side, getting the queen out early, moving the knight twice in the opening. I mean, this is just too weird for words. If this knight moves, then there's knight c7 check. So black now plays knight fg4, again moving a knight for the second time. It's just bonkers. So this protects this knight, but also threatens queen takes pawn, therefore e3. Now a6 attacks this knight, but instead of backing down, Maxime played queen a4. Here is where Giri played h3, and this sensational game, Giri against Nepo, went like this. Nepo survived a deadly bit of opening preparation and won beautifully. You can check out that game on the channel. So yes, instead of that, queen a4. So that means that if pawn takes knight, then queen takes rook. And here Maxime played g5. So if that pawn is taken, then there's knight f3 check, forking king and bishop. So that's already also pretty wacky. Bishop takes knight, knight takes bishop. And here, well, watch out for a knight check displacing the king. So castle's queenside. Okay. Also, slightly wacky, because although yes, it's great to bring the rook into play, I wouldn't say the king is particularly secure on c1 when this c pawn is advanced. It'd be nice to sort of tuck the king further away. And here, funnily enough, so Maxime is playing black here, but he's actually had this position with white, and his opponent, Lenya Dominguez, played bishop e7 here. This was played in Istanbul 2012, and well, they reached an endgame, which actually is also very unclear. Finally ended in a draw. Anyway, instead of bishop e7, as Dominguez played, 10 years later, Maxime played rook b8, just stepping out of this pin, which means that the knight is now attacked, and it moved back. And Maxime followed with bishop g7, and we're on fresh territory now. I mean, whether the players had prepared this, who knows? It's just a very difficult position, actually. So the queen now doesn't really have much of a role on a4. So Predke brought it back to c2, and that's a reasonable position, on a nice diagonal. And here Maxime castled, which looks reasonable. My computer likes queen c7. But I can understand why Maxime didn't play this, because after knight e4, that attacks this pawn, and if h6, then f4 gives white quite a nice initiative, actually. You know, black's king is still in the middle. In fact, after knight e4, my computer wants black to play castle's kingside, giving up a whole pawn, which, I mean, it's not a very human way to play, it has to be said. Although when we see the game, perhaps one understands why. So Maxime plays the human move, castle's kingside. Now, what I'd like you to do is have a think here. How do you play with white? This is a very interesting moment in the game. White to play. I'll have a little slurp of tea. Cheers. You have a little think. White to play. What would you do here? Well, I think the obvious move is pawn to f4, driving the knight back. And if this is exchanged, then that would open up the g-file, and that would certainly be very pleasant for white. But instead the knight drops back here. Now there's pressure on that knight, potential pressure on that pawn. So you don't really want to exchange there. I mean, that could perhaps be taken, or maybe just pawn takes. You'll leave that one dangling, open up the b file, and then d5. I mean, I think black has very good play in combination with that laser of a bishop on g7. That looks like serious counterplay for black. And if pawn takes, queen a5 is a nice move. Hitting that pawn and then preparing b5. I mean, this is serious counterplay. So f4, the obvious move, not quite good enough. Okay, here is what white played. g4. This is absolutely sensational. Beautiful move. And yes, it reminds me of another brilliant attacking game that Judith Polgar played. More on that in a second. So what's the point of g4? Well, basically, white wants to play h4 to open up the h-file. And by playing g4, that blocks this pawn. The pawn can't advance, so white is guaranteed to open up the h-file. If h4 straight away, here's the point, g4 keeps it closed. So g4 is basically just a blocking move. It's fantastic. And it is very difficult for black to find a defence. Knight takes g4 was played. h4. Maxime took. Threatens mate in 1. The knight is attacked, so f5. So that blocks the diagonal and protects the knight. But Predke played in a very simple way now. Bishop e2 hits the knight. So clear threat to take there and take on h7. So the knight had to retreat. And look, with that move g4, white has managed to crack open the h-file for the rook, but also the g-file. And look at black's pieces. That bishop can't move, which means this queen's rook can't get into play. So all white needs to do is just keep opening up the position, which he did with e4. Very simple, very straightforward, just cracking open the diagonal. And funny enough, my machine wants to be even more brutal and play knight d5 with the idea if pawn takes knight, knight takes f5, also very strong, bit flashy. But e4, absolutely straightforward, just crack open the diagonal. And black is lost. Well, this is the game, knight takes pawn, knight takes. So if pawn takes knight, then the queen will just recapture. Bishop takes knight. Rook g1 check. Here we go. The heavy pieces are coming over. I mean, you can see every single one of white's pieces is going to join the attack here. King f7. Now, Predke finishes off the game really beautifully. Instead of taking here, watch this next move. C5, attacking the queen, but also setting up this check. So if queen c6, knight d6, and rook takes bishop, so everything works perfectly. White's piece up with a winning attack. So Maxime played queen b4. He wants to keep hold of the bishop, but a3. That was the final move, just gently nudging the queen away. And again, when the queen moves, knight check, and the rook picks up the bishop, and the attack continues. Well, what a beautiful game. 23 moves, it's all over. That was the sensational move, g4, ensuring that white opens up the h file. Now, let's think of that. Let's go back to that Polgar game. Let me find it. So Polgar against Burkesh. Now I have recorded this on the channel previously, so I'll put the link to the video in the description and in the comments so you can see it. But it's, let me just go back a couple of moves. This position, Polgar played knight g5, attacking here, h6, bishop h7 check, bishop e4, and here, I mean, it's not a good position for black. Black should play rook b8. But instead, Burkesh took the knight, and here Polgar's move was g4, and then h4, and that guaranteed that white opens up the h file. It's a brilliant concept by Judith Polgar, and I repeat, do check out the video where I go into detail explaining exactly what's going on in this position, because that's certainly not the end of white's brilliancy here. Judith had to find a couple more very nice moves. Yeah, an interesting echo, a very nice theme, and easy to overlook, where we can see that Polgar's opponent here overlooked it, but also Maxime Vachier-Lagrave overlooked the concept as well. Thanks for watching.